In the 19th century, monumental buildings rose across the world. They were massive, they were illuminated, and many were crowned with domes, long before modern power grids existed. The question isn't whether they were beautiful. The question is how they functioned. Domes were not isolated to one culture or empire. They appeared across continents, often during the same decades. In North America, domes crowned structures like the United States Capitol in Washington, state capitol buildings across the Midwest, exhibition halls at the 1893 Chicago World's Fair in Europe. Domes rose over. St. Paul's Cathedral in London, Les Invalides in Paris, civic halls across Germany, Austria, and Italy. In Russia, domes defined entire city skylines, particularly in St. Petersburg and Moscow. In Asia, large domed or elevated roof structures appeared in colonial-era administrative buildings in India and Southeast Asia. In South America, cities like Buenos Aires and Rio de Janeiro adopted similar civic architecture. The styles varied, the scale varied, but the pattern remained. Many of these structures were completed before national electrical infrastructure, centralized heating systems, standardized wiring codes. Yet photographs show bright interior lighting, nighttime illumination, public events held after dark. Consider the Chicago World's Fair of 1893. Temporary buildings, many larger than modern convention centers, were illuminated with thousands of lights. According to official accounts, electricity was generated locally, but photographs reveal little evidence of large-scale generators, fuel transport, visible wiring networks proportional to demand. This does not prove an alternative system, but it raises logistical questions. In many historical images, lamps appear, mounted directly to stone walls, suspended from ceilings without visible conduits, integrated into columns and arches. Examples appear in European opera houses, North American train stations, government halls in Australia and New Zealand. Historians suggest early wiring was hidden or removed later. That may be true, but the consistency across regions invites scrutiny. If these were temporary solutions, why do they appear everywhere? Architecturally, domes are among the most complex structures to build. They require precise geometry, advanced load distribution, skilled labor. Yet many domes were topped with metal finials, spires, conductive-looking ornaments. Examples include the U.S. Capitol Dome, the Berlin Cathedral, the Palace of Fine Arts structures, orthodox domes throughout Eastern Europe. In modern engineering, elevated conductive points are functional. They interact with the atmosphere. The question becomes unavoidable. Were these elements purely symbolic or incidentally functional? The idea of drawing energy from the environment was not fringe in the 1800s. Scientists openly studied atmospheric electricity, earth currents, wireless transmission. Nikola Tesla demonstrated wireless lighting and energy transfer publicly. This matters because it establishes context. If scientists were exploring these ideas, architects and engineers were aware of them. That does not mean buildings used such systems, but it does mean the concept was not unthinkable. Many domed buildings were paired with fountains, canals, reflecting pools. At the Chicago World's Fair, water flowed continuously through the site. In Paris, civic buildings integrated fountains and underground channels. In Rome, water systems had existed for centuries. Water, metal, and elevation recur again and again. In modern systems, these elements are associated with conductivity, grounding, energy dissipation. Is this coincidence or design tradition evolving from older principles? That question divides researchers sharply. Large stone buildings are notoriously difficult to heat, yet historical accounts describe comfortable interiors, crowded winter events, year-round use. Some buildings used steam heating, others used fireplaces or underfloor systems, but documentation is often incomplete. In some cases, heating explanations appear after the fact, rather than in original construction records. That gap leaves room for speculation and debate. World's fairs functioned like technological exhibitions. Temporary cities were constructed with massive halls, integrated lighting, flowing water, as well as mechanical systems. Examples include Paris 1889, Paris 1900, and St. Louis 1904. Many structures were demolished afterward. What remains are photographs and logistical mysteries. Were these feats extraordinary but conventional? Or were they built atop knowledge later abandoned? History prefers linear progress. Coal leads to steam. Steam leads to electricity. Electricity leads to grids. Technologies that fail to scale, threaten centralized control, or disappear too quickly are often reduced to footnotes. This doesn't imply suppression, it implies selection. By the early 20th century, domes faded from new civic construction. Architecture shifted toward flat roofs, internalized systems, hidden infrastructure. Energy generation moved out of sight, centralized, controlled, metered. Whether domes ever played a functional role remains unproven. But their disappearance aligns with a shift in how power itself was managed. If these buildings were purely decorative, why were they so expensive to build? Why were they so similar across cultures? And why do explanations often arrive long after the structures themselves? These are not conclusions. They are open questions. Questions that challenge the official explanations we've grown accustomed to. Perhaps domes were nothing more than symbols of authority and ambition. Or perhaps they reflect a brief moment when energy was explored differently, before modern systems became dominant. Either way, the buildings remain silent, elevated, and still asking to be examined.